We have a jam-packed show for you guys today. The Chicago Bulls are expected to finalize their head coaching candidate list going into next week, and we have a couple of names that are expected to be on that final list with Wes Unseld Jr., Micah Nori, and Chris Quinn all still in the mix to be the Chicago Bulls' next head coach. But that's not all. The Chicago Bulls have also brought in Nate Ament for a pre-draft workout, adding him to the list that already includes guys like Kingston Flemings and others. And also, there may be some bigger smoke around the Chicago Bulls and their desire to draft Cameron Carr than initially expected, according to KC Johnson, who also says that the Bulls view this as a 4-person draft. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Plus, with all the questions around Josh Giddey and his future fit with the Chicago Bulls, I want to talk a little bit about that as well heading into the weekend. We're going to talk about all that plus more right after this. What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go and get into this content for today, y'all. So the Bulls are finally moving to the finalist stage of their head coaching search. Now, many Bulls fans are kind of fed up at this point. They're ready to just get the head coaching announced, right? Oh, by the way, before I do that, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel as well. We got a goal of getting to 50,000 subscribers by the start of the 2026-27 season. And about 42% of you guys that watch the show every day are not subscribed to the channel. Hit that subscribe button. But with that said, so the Chicago Bulls are expected to move into the finalist stage of their head coaching search. And that is kind of aligned with what we heard before. We did hear, last week that the Bulls were expected to make a hire by the second week of June. We've now going towards the end of the first week of June, and no hire has been made, which means that they're probably going to go into that one. So according to Brett Siegel, we do have a list of names that are expected to be on the finalist list for the Chicago Bulls. Wes Unseld Jr., surprisingly enough, has emerged as a potential finalist there. Now, we know that the Bulls did interview him or had him on the interview list. Moving to the finalist stage, I'm not going to lie to you guys, it's a little bit shocking for me, right? Like, Wes Unseld Jr. is somebody that never had a winning season, got fired in his third season with the Washington Wizards as a head coach, and he's just somebody that I view as just better as an assistant. When you look at what he's done as an assistant, working with guys like Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic, like getting a lot of the credit for developing those guys, in that system that they had there under Mike Malone, and that was his focus there, and that's where he thrived at. Some people are just better. Some coaches are just better as assistants. You narrow down their job. They can focus on just what their specialty is rather than having to manage the whole team and come up with the X's and O's and things like that. Wes Unseld is somebody that I would not mind staying on the new coaching staff of whoever the next head coach is because of his history of development that he's done there. In Denver and stuff like that. I wouldn't be mad at that. And it feels like that may be one of the reasons why he is a finalist here is because the Bulls are in a heavy development phase. But Wes Unseld would feel like Vinny Del Negro. Like you remember that hire? He had the Bulls the first couple of seasons under Derrick Rose, and then he moved on and he finished his career as a 500 coach. And he never really was a ceiling raiser, but he was a kind of tone setter there in a way. Wes Unseld didn't even do that with the Washington Wizards. Now, they were a team that were expected to compete. They shifted to tanking after they hired him, but part of that is because he wasn't able to have the success there. So it just really feels like kind of a spinning of the wheels for me if Wes Unseld is truly going to be one of or be the head coach of the Chicago Bulls. But we'll see. I'm not getting too upset about it as it stands right now. I personally don't think he's really going to land this job, not when you have some of the names that you have here. But hey, maybe I'm wrong on that one. Chris Quinn remains a serious contender for this job via everything that we've heard, right? Reportedly, and this came out via Brett Siegel, is that the Bulls had Sean Sweeney right up there with Chris Quinn, right? Like he may have been the favorite. Chris Quinn could have been right up there with him. And Quinn has been a guy that if you've watched Chicago Bulls Central for a while, I've talked about Chris Quinn for going on 3 years now. He's just been a guy that I've identified as somebody that I would love to coach this team. I think he brings, culture isn't always transferable, right? So I'm not going to say he's just going to bring Heat culture over to the Chicago Bulls, but as a guy that's worked himself up to be the lead assistant under Eric Spoelstra to do what he's done there, to help develop players that he's done there. I also think Dan Craig being here on the Chicago Bulls, maybe, he can pick Dan Craig's mind and kind of what the changes are, what he gets a feeling on Bryson Graham before he makes that decision. I do a daily NBA show, Locked On NBA, with Wes Goldberg, who is the host of Locked On Heat. And me and him talked a lot about Chris Quinn over the last year. And he told me that Chris Quinn doesn't take interviews for jobs he's not fully ready to take. Now, with that said, though, one of the knocks and one of the questions that many people ask about Chris Quinn is he's gotten these interviews. Why hasn't he been able to land the job? Why hasn't he been able to land an NBA head coaching job? And I even heard some things that Chris Quinn maybe doesn't interview the best, right? And, I've been there before. Like not everybody interviews well. Like that is a skill set within of itself, right? And so I think if Chris Quinn is like that not a very strong interviewer, he's going to have to really give his plan and focus on the X's and O's and maybe what his strengths is. And it'd be really crazy if a coach just not interviewing well, not to say that they don't have the right mindset to coach, but if that just continues to hold them back. But Chris Quinn is a guy that's on that finalist list. He's my favorite candidate here for the Chicago Bulls. I'm just as high, well, not just as high, but I'm high on Johnny Bryant too, but he was not mentioned, not at least in this report by Brett Siegel. Doesn't mean he won't be on the list. It just means that Brett Siegel may not have that intel on him. Micah Nori was another name mentioned by Brett Siegel as well that is on that finalist list as well. So I think when you look at it, Wes Unseld has the development history that clearly Bryson Graham is high on his list of priorities for the next head coach, is to have a developmental background, to be able to develop players. Chris Quinn is part of Heat culture. He brings player development as well. He brings this really solid X's and O's. We've seen and heard that he's been one of the architects of the adjustments that the Miami Heat, that Eric Spoelstra trusts him to call those adjustments. And some of those happen against the Chicago Bulls in play-in tournaments, right? The thing that we also heard in this is that John Paxson remains involved in this search as well. Like I told you guys a while back, what did I say? Before Bryson Graham was hired, I was like, hey, Paxson is low-key one of the most important people within the Bulls front office right now. And he still he's like a cockroach. He's never going to, the Bulls, everybody's going to come and go. Like he may be here longer than Jerry Reinsdorf. Like Pax just seems to just always be around and is never going anywhere. But Paxson remains in this, involved in the coaching search as well. He will have a voice in the hiring of the coach. It is what it is. Like you guys should expect that. I told you guys, Pax has been on payroll for 2 decades now. He's not going to be off payroll anytime soon. But so the next head coach for the Chicago Bulls, it's going to have to align with what Bryson Graham wants for this rebuild, right? You're not about just surviving a transition. It's about helping set the ground floor and the groundwork of what this new phase for the Chicago Bulls looks like. So next week, we could very well get our head coach announced, which I think would be great for the Chicago Bulls. It leaves you about a week and a half before the NBA draft. And let's just get it done. Like I think that's what you would like. Just get it done. Let's get a guy hired in here. Let's get the right guy, right? Take your time, find the right guy. That's all fine. We have heard that Tiago Splitter is a finalist for the Portland Trailblazers job. I told you guys a little while ago that I had heard that Portland may be circling back around to Tiago Splitter after talking to some other coaches. Seems like coaches aren't necessarily as enamored with the new ownership there. So Tiago Splitter could end up keeping that job with Portland and not coming over to Chicago. May not even be on the finalist list for Chicago once they have those in-person interviews. So keep an eye out on that. We'll see what's going to happen here. You guys know we're going to cover it all here at Chicago Bulls Central because that's what we do. But also what we do is cover the draft, right? So let's get into the draft news, right? One of the first things that got announced yesterday is that the Chicago Bulls have officially had an in-person workout with Nate Ament, right? So he's now worked out with the Chicago Bulls, and that's fine, right? This is a guy that has a lot of really good tools. He fits slap. Like you talk about people who fit slap. We'll talk a little bit about that in the Josh Giddey segment. Nate Ament fits everything that you want in slap just about, right? Size, length, athleticism, physicality. He brings all of that, right? 6'10", skilled, has really good fluid size as well. So that official workout is good. His shooting upside and defensive tools fit is amazing here, right? Like that's what Nate Ament has here. He brings that size. He brings the physicality. He brings the efficiency as well, right? And so, I look at Nate Ament working out for the Chicago Bulls, and I just say, like, yeah, that this fits. It feels like somebody that the Bulls would want to work out. Problem is, I think the Bulls are going to work out a lot of players that are slated to go anywhere between 6 and 14 because one of those guys is likely to fall, and that's kind of what we're seeing here with Nate Ament. The frame that he has there, the defensive versatility. The thing that you want that's one of the questions about Nate Ament is how much is his future and shooting? How much is he going to be able to space the floor? Right now, with the Bulls being in the top four, and we'll talk a little bit about K.C. Johnson and his comments about how the Bulls view this as a 4-player draft. If the Bulls were to draft Caleb Wilson, I just don't see a world in which you draft Nate Ament personally. And maybe I could be wrong on that. Maybe Bryson Graham has this envision for all these forwards, right? Like just are interchangeable and things like that. And that's great if you decide to do that. But the scoring versatility, he can score in the face-up. He can score off the dribble, which is good. He can finish with either hand, and he was developing that shot to be able to stretch the floor. So those are things that's really good. The shooting potential, the high release that he has, the mechanics that he has, he shapes up and has the tools to be a long-term decent shooter, right? He's a really solid playmaker for his size as well. Brings some of those defensive tools that you like, the rebounding, all that type of stuff. And so he's a player that, on paper, when you just look at what and how he shapes up to project as a player, he brings a lot of exactly what you want. So there's no negative there in regards to that. Now, I will say this. He's going to have to put on weight. He's going to have to, especially if he's going to want to deal with the physicality at the NBA level. His speed of the shot, the mechanics are all there. The mechanics are fluid, all that type of stuff. It could be a little bit of a slower release, which could affect him early in the NBA. He's going to have to speed up that release, right? But that just comes with getting repetitions, those type of things. And he's not always the most efficient player either, right? But I think his ability to do all those other things make him a really good, he's a long-term prospect there that could be one of the reasons why he falls in this draft. If somebody wants to go a player like Yaxel Lindenberg early and a more proven prospect, a guy like Nate Ament could fall and is perfectly fine there. He's still very much so developing. Still a very young kid that's still going to have a lot of time to develop. And so that would be, again, why the Bulls are focusing so much as development being one of the factors that they want with their next head coach. But that wasn't the only draft news that we got, right? Of course, now the Chicago Bulls, just to kind of recap everybody that the Bulls have worked out. They've worked out Nate Ament now gets added to that. They've worked out Keaton Wagler. They've worked out Kingston Flemings. They've worked out Morez Johnson. They've worked out Bennett Stritz. They've worked out Mikael Brown. They worked out a lot of guys. Ibuka Okore, he's worked out as well. A lot of guards still on the list, but we're starting to see the Bulls work out more than just guards, right? So that's starting to happen here. But K.C. Johnson talked a little bit about the Bulls draft situation. We have a couple of draft notes from this. One, that the Bulls do view this as a 4-player draft and are very unlikely to draft anybody who's not projected to go into the top 4. What that means is that all the Darius Acuff truthers, it's probably not going to be Darius Acuff, which I have been telling you guys this for a while. Like, I get it. I get why being enamored. He is an exciting player, and I think that Darius Acuff is going to have a really good career. But I think when you look at how the top 4 players all project, the ceiling that those guys have, the versatility that they have as well, right? Like, I think those type of things is what's going to separate this. So the Bulls are probably not going to go Darius Acuff. They're going to go whoever falls in that top 4. And it's one of the easier decisions to make in the draft, especially if you view all these top 4 players with the very high upside and can't miss prospects, is that you get to just sit at number 4 and take whoever falls. And that's what it comes down to. So if it's not AJ DeBonsta, Darren Peterson, Cam Boozer, Caleb Wilson, it's unlikely the Bulls are going to select anybody who's not named one of those 4 guys in the top 4. Let's just deal with it. That's just the reality of it. It's unlikely to happen. One of those guys are going for the Chicago Bulls. That's it. That's all. Deal with it, right? But we also got some other draft details. Despite working out for the Chicago Bulls, K.C. Johnson did mention that the Bulls may not be as high on Morez Johnson. Now, it does seem like that this was recorded before the workout. It seemed like this may have been recorded a day early. Then it got posted. Morez may have worked later in that same day. So take for what you will, or it could be solidified by what they saw in that workout. The Bulls could have, maybe not already been as high on Morez Johnson, got an in-person workout with him, and then looked at it and said, a lot of the things that we're worried about really was pretty loud here, and they could then, at that point now, be out on Morez Johnson. So take that for a grain of salt. Like I say with everybody, not anything just against K.C. Johnson or anything like that, but take everything you hear from an insider, anything from a reporter at this point in the season as with a grain of salt, because it is what it is there. But if the Bulls are not as high on Morez Johnson, he's really the only big that they've worked out. I don't know what that means. But one thing that K.C. Johnson did allude to as well is that it seems like the Chicago Bulls are very high on Cameron Carr. Now, add them to the list, right? Cameron Carr's draft combine really shot him up. He was somebody that was slated to go outside the lottery, lower end of the first round. after the draft combine, he shot all the way up. Some mocks have him going as high as like 6 or 7, right? So this is the Bulls, of course, hoping that he's still going to be there at number 15. But according to KC Johnson, they are extremely high on Cameron Carr. And it begs the question of, for me at least, on does that mean that would the Bulls be willing to trade up to get Cameron Carr? Maybe you trade up with all the second round picks that you have, something like that, to get Cameron Carr if you decide to do that. Now, I've said before, Braden Burries could also fall. So like that, I'd be perfectly fine with Braden Burries as well. He's another two-way guard. But you look at Cam Carr, the fact that he measured out with the legit length, the size of the weight is a little bit of where I think he weighed in like between 186, 188. He's going to have to put on some weight there. But the thing when it comes down to Cameron Carr is he's just one of those players that can really fit in just about any system. The length that he has, the athleticism, the shooting upside, the scoring ability, both on ball and off ball shooting, those are things that make a player being able to fit in just about anything any system that you can throw at them. He has that. He's a high-level shooter. The catch-and-shoot ability is there. The off-ball movement is there. He relocates well. He comes off picks and screens really well. He knows how to navigate that. He finds it. He slashes as well. He's also a guy that can finish around the rim. He has a really good vertical in regards to that, too. He finishes in transition, and he can start the break as well because of his defense, right? The biggest concern with him really comes down to physicality because he is a little bit lighter. Also playmaking for others. While he can create his own shot, he's not really a hugely versatile passer, but that's why you have point guards on your team, right? And I do think at times he can fall in love with bad shots, but that's kind of any player that can shoot at the level that Cameron Carr can at that age. They tend to fall in love with bad shots early on. That's part of development. That's part of coaching. That's part of getting him, finding him to get his spots and his rhythm and not just fall in love with the bad shots. But hearing that the Bulls are high on Cameron Carr should not be a surprise to anybody. Cameron Carr makes a whole lot of sense for the Bulls. He makes a whole lot of sense for a lot of teams, and that's why he could be off the board well before the Chicago Bulls pick. And we just got to see what's going to happen in regards to that one. But I love to hear that the Bulls are high on Cameron Carr. We just got to see what they're going to do with it now, if they do anything with it in regards to it. So I think at the end of the day, Cameron Carr is a name that keep an eye out in this draft for the Chicago Bulls, because I do think the Bulls are, now hearing it from KC Johnson, the Bulls have a love for Cameron Carr. We just got to see if he's going to be there on the board when the Chicago Bulls pick. The Bulls to take advantage of that, and we'll see what's going to happen in regards to that one. But with that said, let's get into the last topic. There's been a lot made of Josh Giddey here recently. And Bulls fans say, can we package Josh Giddey in 15 and move up to 10, all this type of stuff. Here's what I'm going to say, right? And I need everybody to hear this. Josh Giddey's not going anywhere anytime soon. Immediately, no, it's not going to happen. Bryson Graham is going to want to evaluate Josh Giddey. Now, I do think there are some things that could happen in this draft that could put a little pressure on that. As I said, the Bulls worked out a lot of point guards, at least initially on. If the Bulls were to draft a point guard at pick number 15, it puts even more pressure on this conversation, right? But I think for those that have made this Josh Giddey conversation just about slap, and I'm telling y'all now, when I see people say, oh, he doesn't fit slap, Bryson Graham said in his own interview that a player doesn't have to fit slap to be a good player for the team, right? So I need people not to focus just on slap. Like, it's so much now that, oh, well, that's not a slap player. That's not a slap player. Like, it's not going to be just slap, right? But, of course, Josh Giddey, if we're talking about slap, his wingspan's basically the same as his height. Athleticism has been a knock on Josh Giddey since his pre-draft process, right? But he has improved as a free throw shooter and attacker at the rim. He's improved as a catch-and-shoot player phenomenally, right? Which now keeps defenses honest. No more can you sag off of Josh Giddey and just expect him not to hit the three-pointer. Now, there are going to be some games where he's colder from that, but it is when it comes down to it, right? I think overall, a lot of people and a lot of fans are evaluating Josh Giddey for how he played after the ankle injury, and that's fair. Listen, I'm not saying that should not be part of the evaluation, but I think we also need to look at how he played before that. And it's going to be everything's on Josh Giddey at this point, right? Forget the fans, forget me, forget anybody. It comes down to Josh Giddey's going to have to prove that he can fit in with the direction that this roster's going and the players that we start building this roster with. Now, luckily, players with size, length, athleticism, physicality, and shooting all fit with exactly what you want around Josh Giddey. The question becomes about how much in those margins can he live and improve in to where it works, right? His passing, his rebounding, all that still fit exactly how this team is going to shape up and want to play also. So, we'll see. Josh Giddey is a player that can make the game easier on like a Caleb Wilson as he develop his game, right? It's just a simple fact there. He can make it easy on a player like Noah Essengay as they develop and figure out their game and their spots. He can do that. But then again, like, you can find a more, like, the thing about Josh Giddey that I'll say, even though I'm a player, I'm a person who likes Josh Giddey. I do like Josh Giddey, but I realize, hey, Bryson Graham has to build this roster the way that he wants to build it. But I will say this, Josh Giddey just makes it that you have to build kind of in a certain way, right? And the one thing that I've always said is that anybody who comes in, if they want more flexibility in how they can build their roster, it could leave Josh Giddey on the outside looking in. Am I saying that for sure? No. 2026-27 is going to be an evaluation season for Josh Giddey. That's what it's going to be about. Bryson Graham's going to bring in more players that fit his philosophy, fit him and what the new coach, whenever that hire is made, how they want to play basketball. It is completely up to Josh Giddey to figure that out and to show that he can be a part of that. And we'll see what's going to happen in regards to that. That's it. That's all. That's really what it comes down to. Can Josh Giddey show that? If he can, great. If he doesn't, then Bryson Graham is going to be somebody who's not going to be afraid to turn over a roster. And that's one thing that, I don't see Bryson Graham doing what AK did. AK held on to assets too long, hoping that they were just going to magically eventually learn to play together. Bryson Graham, I do think, is going to use this season very highly in that evaluation. And then he's going to, maybe even by the trade deadline, I'm not saying for Josh Giddey specifically, but by the trade deadline, we could see some players move. By this time next offseason, we can see a lot of players move. Bryson Graham isn't going to sit and wait and just hope that things magically start working out. He is going to be a lot more aggressive than what. You look at how much of that roster turned over for Atlanta in his time there. It's going to be probably something similar here with Chicago, because Bryson Graham is going to be somebody that has that vision early and wants to fit within that. And we're just going to have to see how that shakes out and how it works out. But that's going to do it for today's episode, man. I think next week is going to be a week for a lot of Bulls news. Between the head coach, more draft workouts, kind of getting more of a feel for how the Chicago Bulls and what they want to do at pick number 15 is going to happen over that time period as well. And I think as well, like Bryson Graham with this coaching search, it becomes more than just a coach. It's a culture setting. It's a tone setter for this, as is this draft. And as draft intel comes in, we're going to see what's going to happen with this team. And in that evaluation mode, what ends up going forward with this team. But let me know down below your thoughts on everything. Who do you think should be the Bulls' next head coach? Are you buying Cameron Carr, the Bulls being high on Cameron Carr at number 15? And what do you think is going to happen long-term with Josh Giddey on this roster and how Bryson Graham will evaluate him? Let me know all that down below. Make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel as well. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode or an upload. You can follow us at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullscentralpod@gmail.com. And lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the #1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that is thanks to you, lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you right if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.